Chapter 13. Miracle on the Mountain. The morning the visitor was expected, Heidi and Clara sat out on the grandfather's bench looking down over the valley. At last they saw the grandmama on her white pony. When Frau Sesemann was near enough, she called out,
"Clara, why aren't you in your chair?"
Alarmed, the grandmama dismounted hastily.
"But Clara,"
she cried as she approached the hut.
"is it really you, so red-cheeked and round as an apple? Child, I hardly know you."
With that, Heidi slipped her arm under Clara's, and the two girls stood and began to walk towards the visitor. Frau Sesemann stood still, at first from fear, but then from surprise, as she realized that Clara was walking upright. The grandmama began to laugh and cry at once, and touched Clara's arm just to be sure that what she saw was real. She rushed to the uncle and grasped both of his hands.
My dear uncle, how much my son and I have to thank you for."
No, he said. It was the sunshine and the mountain air that made her better.
"And Little Swan's lovely milk, too,"
added Clara. Just then, Peter's whistle sounded, and he and the goats came bounding down the mountain. The grandmama was enchanted to see the animals she had heard so much about.
"Come here, my boy,"
she called to Peter. Stricken with terror and guilt, Peter stared at the well-dressed old woman and began babbling.
"I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, and now it's all smashed to pieces."
Frau Sesemann turned with puzzled eyes to the uncle.
"What is wrong with the boy?"
I imagine, he said, that Peter is speaking of Clara's wheelchair. He is the wind that blew it down the mountain, and now he fears he will be punished."
The grandmama looked into Peter's terrified face and said,
"No, my dear uncle, the boy has been punished enough. But here is something to think about, boy. Anyone who does a wrong deed and thinks no one sees it is mistaken. This time wickedness has turned to good, for Clara tried even harder to walk once she lost her chair. But you must remember always to think before you are tempted to do a wicked act. Do you understand?"
Peter nodded.
"Good,"
the grandmama said, and smiled.
"Now I should like to give you a present to remember the people from Frankfurt. What would you like to have most in the world?"
Peter could hardly believe his ears. A present rather than a whipping?
"A penny,"
he said. The old woman smiled and took $1 from her purse.
"Here we have 100 pennies, 2 for every week of the year."
Then she called Heidi to stand by her side.
"And you, dear child,"
she said.
"what would you like?"
Heidi didn't need to think. She knew just what she wanted.
"The bed I had in Frankfurt for Peter's grandmother, so she'll never have to sleep in a cold, hard bed again."
"Dear child,"
the grandmother said, kissing her.
"it shall be sent as soon as I return to Frankfurt."
Clara spent one last night in the loft bedroom under the stars. The next morning, when it was time for the uncle to carry her down the mountain to the waiting carriage that would take her home, Clara shed hot tears because she had to leave the beautiful Heidi comforted her and said,
"It will be summer again in no time, and then you will come back, and it will be more beautiful than ever. You will walk everywhere, and we can go up to the pasture with the goats every day and be jolly."
"I will leave a greeting for Peter,"
Clara said through her tears.
"and for the goats. I would like to send Little Swan a present so she won't forget me."
"That's easy,"
Heidi replied.
"Send her a little salt. You know how gladly she licks the salt from grandfather's hand at night."
"Oh, then I will certainly send her 100 pounds of salt from Frankfurt."
Clara laughed. Then the grandmother and Clara mounted their ponies, for Clara was now able to ride down and no longer needed a sedan chair. Heidi stationed herself at the farthest edge of the slope and waved her hand to Clara and the grandmama until the last speck of horse and rider had disappeared.
Summer will come again.
She called to her cherished friends, and so it did. Questions. 1. What surprise did Clara have for her father and grandmother? 2. What made Clara better? 3. How did Peter feel when he met the well-dressed old woman? 4. Did the grandmama lecture Peter on how to behave once he had made a mistake? 5. Did the grandmama give Peter a present? 6. What did the grandmama give Peter? 7. What present would Heidi like to have from the grandmama? 8. Did Clara's father and grandmother have to thank the uncle for what he had done for Clara? 9. What was the present Clara would send Little Swan? 10. How did Clara go down the mountain to the waiting carriage that would take her home?